Well, hello. I'm here with Doug to talk about the cybersecurity job market and other things. And it is Friday, November 1, 2024.
Sam, we're into November.
We
The
are
election is what? Less than a week away.
3 or 4 days away. We'll have the election, followed by, of course, no decision, followed by months of arguing in court and riots and stuff. And God only knows if we'll ever decide who the new leader is. Our,
Exactly.
our democracy is
Exactly.
running, like a well-oiled machine.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
we should go to every other nation and say, "You idiots, why don't you have good government like we do?" Anyway, that's where we're at.
Yeah, Sam, it's interesting. Somebody maybe about a decade ago gave a TED talk, and the title was something like A Tale of Two Nations.
Yeah.
And the person grew up in China and understood Chinese rule, came to the United States, spent about a decade here going to school, running a business in the United States, and then went back to China. And it was a good contrast to what it's like to live in a democracy versus Chinese government.
Yeah, very good. And what did he say?
Well, he just said they're they're different.
I
They're
know.
pros and they're cons.
Well, I remember Naomi Wu, Real Sexy Science,
Yeah,
posted a video when people started saying China's reaction to the lockdown was terrible and COVID. And she said, well, the government is protecting us here and people feel safe and it looks better than it is in the US. And you guys shouldn't be all high and mighty about how you're superior about it. And I can respect that.
yeah, and the one statistic that he gave that kind of stuck with me that stuck out was if you look post World War II, I think there are roughly what about 215, 16, 18 countries in the world, somewhere in there.
Sounds right.
Yeah. So, and again, I haven't looked at this video, but pre-World War II, there were something like 50 countries that had a democracy.
Uh,
And post World War II, America spread democracy around the country, around the world, pardon me, around the world. So we spread democracy. It got up to um, a, just over half, if I recall correctly. And then around 2010, there was an inflection and it started to decrease by one or two countries, not by a lot,
yeah.
but countries went back to some other form of rule other than dictatorship.
Other than
So,
democracy,
other than democracy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
towards
Sorry.
dictatorship, presumably.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know where we stand now, but it's an interesting talk. And you're right. It's just a
Well,
different type of rule.
Well, it's the same thing as America. We were only a true democracy from 65 until Citizens United, and that was the 90s. And after that, we were a falling democracy. We were like 10 out of 10 democracy for about 30 years, and now we've fallen to like 9 or 8 on the scale of people measure how democratic your country is.
Yeah,
And it's fallen fast. I mean,
yeah,
studies show like 72% of all Republicans no longer believe that the election is honest and fair. They say if Trump doesn't win, that means there was massive cheating. So that I think is Trump's largest legacy is he has kicked one of the legs off the stool of democracy that can't be repaired. I think an enormous amount of Americans no longer believe our elections are legitimate. They think they're already living in a dictatorship, and that is enough to like tear it down. I think. I
yeah.
don't.
I have a tendency to agree with you, but this is an experiment that's in progress, so we don't know what the outcome will be.
No, but yep, we are an experiment trying to make democracy hold together, and we will see what happens.
Yeah, it is interesting about the election fraud. And at a local level, I could see election fraud occurring because of the number of people that could be involved.
And it certainly has in the past.
And it has. And we've had a couple incidents of destroyed ballots, ballot boxes on fire, things like that. So there are obviously there are obviously people within our country that I would argue are not government officials who are trying to alter the outcome of an election, by, for example, lighting a ballot box on fire.
Yeah.
But that's only going to destroy what, 1,000, 2,000
Well,
ballots.
yeah, they were even able to identify them. And so they're I know, so the consequence of that is very small. That's the point. There's not enough to
Yeah,
affect the national election. You could probably affect something like a mayor's election.
yeah, yeah. I would agree. And there have been times that there have been incorrect computer programs for ranked choice voting where the ranked choicing was incorrectly implemented in software. And to prove that democracy works, when we found that it was corrected, the right candidate that won was eventually put into office.
Yeah.
But to get something at the presidential level, you're talking about, I don't know how many counties there are, how many, well, we know how many states, but think of all the people that would have to be involved and the number of votes that would have to be altered.
Well, the problem is when you have a 50-50 election like we do, every little
Yeah,
thing, there's like, in Texas, I think the governor said last time in 2020 or else 2016, I've heard about it, he managed to invalidate like a whole bunch of mail-in ballots in court after the election. And he said, if I hadn't done that, the Democrats would have won. So, there are legal challenges that, and
yeah,
like the Bush v. Gore, where they managed to affect one state and that state would make the outcome. So the point is when you are 50-50, then every little thing counts. And at that point, I would say it doesn't matter which one gets in. Neither one of them is clearly violating the will of the people. Half the people want one and half the people want the other. So it doesn't. You can decide it with a coin toss, and that would still be equally fair.
yeah. My wife took a look at the ballots for a measure that was in Berkeley, and she wanted to see what the contested ballots were, why they weren't counted. And it's interesting that a number of them were they didn't sign,
Yeah.
right? And that's understandable. However, the registrar of voters is supposed to go and get those corrected.
Well, actually, apparently it's not that clear. And there's all this other
Okay.
small things, like you're supposed to have two envelopes, one inside the other, and you're supposed to put your address, your phone number on it, but you might put a different phone number on it or something. There's a bunch of ways to make mistakes.
Yeah, and but there are also ways that people intentionally, you can see that they clearly marked it,
Yeah.
but the ballot was considered
Oh,
not countable because they wrote something like, I don't want any fucking mayor,
yeah. Yeah.
is a write-in vote. And so that invalidated the entire ballot.
Yep. This is very much like the old hanging chads. I mean, the problem
Yeah,
is it's when you're counting something, there are all these edge cases, and you could argue. And that's why I've heard that the Trump supporters have been going through mail-in ballots, and people said the signatures matched, but they say that signature match is not good enough. So you really should have invalidated another 10% of them. And that's, it's just a sliding scale. How close does a signature have
yeah,
to be? So it's
yeah, yeah.
in a
And,
50-50 election, it's not a perfect process. There is some,
yeah, yeah,
anyway,
yeah. And signature experts can't agree.
well, yeah. Anyway, so I have a bunch of,
So yeah,
it's good that we
yeah.
started.
Anyway, let's get to our real stories.
Yeah,
So
well,
we'll
I've
have
got a
an
bunch of politics stories.
okay,
Might as
go
well talk
for it.
about them. So the first one here, so Elon Musk is handing out $1 million a day to
Right.
people who find his petition uh, and register to vote, and that is almost certainly illegal at both the federal and the state level. But the feds did not choose to do anything about it. And the state that did something about it, the judge blocked the emergency injunction to stop him, so he's just going to continue doing it. And this is part of his very long-standing pattern. Elon Musk just ignores laws, ignores his debts, ignores obligations, and he gets away with it most of the time, just like Donald Trump, on the grounds that he's so rich and important, and he has so many lawyers that he can just ignore your stupid rules. And the Attorney General, his extreme reluctance to do anything about election crimes to avoid looking partisan plays into this, of course. So anyway, that's what's going on with him. And
Sam,
yeah,
one little comment. If
yeah,
and was that Pennsylvania?
yeah,
Yeah, because I think in Pennsylvania he's giving $1 million.
yeah. And
Yeah.
he's
Okay.
sued by the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, but it's been blocked in court. He doesn't get an emergency injunction, and the feds are too slow to react. So it's nothing's going to happen until after the election. And of course, after the election, he might be in power. And
Or he could be pardoned, depending on who
that's right.
wins.
That's right. Anyway, and so
So
and
so here there's a lawyer that did an analysis on this in YouTube. The most Elon could get is a prison sentence of 2 years, if that.
oh, and I don't think anybody would send him to prison. I think they
Right, right.
find him some money. Yep.
I'm just saying that it's a trivial amount of time, so
Well,
to speak.
well, 2 years in prison would probably change his mind a bit if he actually went, but I'm sure he'd have appeals and drag it out forever and not really go to prison. Like Trump.
Exactly. But yeah,
I mean,
it's not like a 10-year sentence or a 20-year sentence if you stole billions of dollars, like some women we know.
well, yeah, yeah. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
the other thing is X is, of course, a huge source of I mean, it's disinformation of all kinds now. And they have this thing called community notes that is supposed to like mark tweets that are considered disinformation. And someone has done an analysis of it. Actually, Bellinger has written it up at Ars Technica, showing that those community notes are complete garbage because somebody can mark it and say, this appears to be disinformation. Then all the other X users vote on it. So all they do is they vote it down and say, no, it's not disinformation. And so it doesn't take effect. And they say, even in the cases where it does take effect, he says a bunch of them, the community note appears within an hour. Yeah, and almost all the retweets and everything take place in the first 15 minutes. So the fact is, the community note system of removing disinformation, in fact, is completely useless and does no
I
good.
see.
And I remember there was another study I saw a week or two ago where they said most people who are inclined towards conspiracy theories, and I think it was most Republicans, will put more weight in something if it has a community note on it saying, aha, that's the government trying to cover it up. That means it's true. So,
Yeah.
so
Well, there's the adage that the a lie travels around the world before
yeah,
the truth gets up out of bed or
I
wakes
know.
up in the morning. All
Yes.
right, another story.
Yeah, I got more of these. So there's robocalls are coming. People are very worried about it. And they're now very afraid that election officials will get robocalls that appear to come from their boss saying, "Oh, we moved that voting location across town, or we decided to delay it by another 5 hours or something." They're trying to prepare for that. And so people are telling their staff, if you hear me call you and say something fishy, hang up and call me back. And now they're saying what we should do is have a secret code word so you can tell if it's really me. Old fashioned,
Yeah.
like the World War II. So anyway, that's where we're at. The people are preparing for that and probably quite reasonably. And the one that I mentioned before we started recording that caught my attention, RFK Jr. says Trump has promised him control of the public health agencies. He says he will have public control of the public health agencies, which is HHS and its sub-agencies, CDC, FDA, NIH, and a few others, and the USDA. And of course, he's going to get rid of pesticides, vaccines, and turn all the medical systems in the government into his bizarre uh, science fiction witchcraft, which, by the way, is what happened in Florida. They took Lebovo, the head of the American Frontline Doctors, where they actually preach that diseases are caused by people having sex with demons in their sleep. And he's now the Attorney General of Florida. And he's been blocking the COVID vaccine and other vaccines there. So is his madness the kind of madness one might well expect from another Trump administration? Like most Democrats, I'm sort of amazed that anybody after 4 years of Trump would want another 4 years of Trump. He did a lot of things like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I got one more of these politics story. So Elon Musk is now financing a get out the vote effort. And it turns out he's doing it the way he does everything. He is tricking workers and lying to them. So the Nordockers are flown to Michigan, driven in the back of a U-Haul, told they'd have to pay hotel bills unless they met unrealistic quotas. And at least one was surprised to find out they were working to elect Donald Trump. So he somehow muscled these people into it with
Wait,
threats.
say this again.
Yeah, he muscled these people into his get out the vote operation. And
And,
they
and
didn't
who
even,
who are the people?
well,
Does it say?
people are complaining. I think, um, contracted.
Like a Craigslist ad.
They were contractors, contracted by a firm associated with America PAC. Now, what I've heard is what they did was they took Ron DeSantis's people who were just mercenaries and just hired them. And that's why they're, among other things, completely fraudulent. They have an app. There's a guy, I've talked about that before. There's an app that measures how many doors you knock on, and there's a guy that just figured out how to move the geolocation of your phone artificially, make it look like you're knocking on the doors when you aren't, and put up a TikTok about it. So everybody's pretty much just cheating. But anyway, it's the ground game is a mess in every way. They appear to be exploiting the workers, lying to them, and doing a bad job. And yet they appear to have 50% chance of winning. So I think you're on mute.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So Elon goes to Florida. Not Elon, but Elon's agents, right?
Yeah.
Goes to Florida, packs a whole bunch of people into the back of a U-Haul. That doesn't
Michigan.
sound right.
It's
Oh,
Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah, nobody would do it in Florida because I don't think it's a swing state.
Oh, I see. I thought they drove them to Michigan. Okay.
They did apparently drive them to Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah. So somehow a group in Michigan, and they're theoretically doing door knocking,
Right. This
but
is
they're not selling solar.
No, see, this is another part of the election process that I didn't really understand. Like you said,
Yeah.
one surprising part is they repair ballots. They take ballots that are filled out wrong and they repair them, but only if they're on their side. They also find people who are likely voters, and then they knock on their doors to say, "Did you go vote here? I'll take you to vote." They
Yeah.
just the doors for people on their side. They remind those guys to vote. So that's how it
Well,
works.
yeah, but that's not illegal, is it?
No, neither is repairing the ballots of people. It's just kind of nasty and not at all like the perfect process I would imagine, where you just count them and see which guys won. There's these ways to move it by, perhaps a fraction of a percent one way or the other by these tricks. And the door
Yeah.
knock is considered pretty relevant. I think it matters a lot.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. If you get a large enough army.
Yeah.
And you know who I know who did that years ago was Jim Jones of People's Temple when he came to the Bay Area.
Oh, I didn't know.
And I believe also in the South that they sent busloads of people to go out and get the vote out. And there was some car, or I take that back. Maybe he used his buses to transport people to the South to get the vote out. And I believe he helped Harvey Milk get into office by getting the vote out for Harvey Milk.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know
So,
in the South, they have a bunch of the black churches will have a Sunday when they all get in buses after church and go vote.
yeah,
And they've made great efforts to try to block and make that illegal because that's
yeah,
part of the black vote. So,
yeah,
down in the details, there's just a lot of like skullduggery and dirty tricks moving this thing around.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, Sam, you brought up one of my
Yeah.
related topics, which is TikTok. And CNET has reported that a TikTok video shows a hack where customers of Morgan Chase Bank can get money from themselves from a check that they deposit.
Oh, yeah. I heard about this one.
And we're now into the excess of some people have collected over $500,000, $600,000 from Chase. And the way this works is you go to an ATM, you deposit a check. Normally there's a hold that's put on the check, so you can't withdraw any money for 3 days. But Chase apparently has an algorithm where you can immediately withdraw, I believe it's a percentage, or you can withdraw cash that overdraws your bank account. And so that's easy enough to show on TikTok.
Yeah.
Um,
I think this is true of my bank. I think when I deposit a check, I can withdraw like 1/4 of the money right away.
but then you can deposit another check
Or I could just
with
write a check for like $100 million.
yeah. So I don't know. I've not seen the TikTok video, but it's interesting that it sounds like tens of thousands of people have done this. And what's not mentioned in the TikTok video is that this is fraud, and it's fraud at the federal level.
Yeah. And you're leaving an obvious trail right back to you. I mean, how are you going
Exactly.
to get away with this?
Yeah. So Chase Morgan Bank is starting with the highest number. They got all the people that pulled this off,
Yeah.
and they did a sort from highest to lowest,
Yeah.
and they're suing people.
Yeah. As they should. I mean, this reminds me
Yeah.
of one of the cases when I was working in fraud restitution, where people would trick people into signing up for they would trick them into redirecting their dial-up modem through a pay service with like a web page. And so the end result is they'd now be paying like several dollars a minute for their internet connection and not know that. So they end up owing hundreds of dollars by the end of the month. But since it was done through the phone network and there were complete records, everybody just reversed the charges within the phone network. So we almost had no work to do. There's only like a small number of people we had to mail them checks because they just reversed it on the computers. The scammers did not get the money. And you can't get away with crimes in a highly controlled system like this.
Yeah. 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 And you're right. You have a complete audit log, and in some cases, I'm sure they have the video.
Yeah, I mean, you have the check, which is apparently no good, and you know how much money they took. You know who they are, unless you're going to like do this and then flee the country. I don't understand how you're going to get away with it.
Yeah. And what's interesting is TikTok calls it a hack, right?
Say that.
And it is a hack, but so is going into a bank with a gun
Yeah,
and
that's right.
saying, right, that's also a hack.
You could call it that. Yeah.
So that,
Social engineering.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. Yep. So I
And
guess,
and
yeah,
yeah, and in both cases, it's illegal. This is definitely
of course, it's
right,
basically
right,
bank robbery. I mean,
right.
why did anybody think this is right or that they're going to get away with it?
Yeah. Well, because it goes under the title of a hack.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yep.
So Sam, I got another one for you.
Yeah.
We have we have to get a business license, and we get this
Oh, well,
every
it's
year.
really blurry.
Oh, it's not gonna.
Something about business license taxes or
Yeah,
something.
it's a business license, and normally it's a $35 fee that we pay.
Yeah.
This time we get it's a fictitious business name expiration notice, and this one is for $135.
Hmm.
But if you look at it closely, it's not from the city. It's
Yeah.
from a company that says, "Oh, we will renew your business license for $100 and
Oh,
35."
oh, yeah. I've been hearing
So
about a
it's
lot.
not it's not fraud, but it's a service fee, if you will. But they don't tell you it's not the government, and they make it very clear that you're paying the renewal fee with in real fine print at the very bottom. It
Yeah.
says something like this is a service.
Yeah. So that's clearly misleading and probably illegal, but maybe not. There's one in San Francisco that will contact you and say, you have to put up this poster warning workers of their rights. And they'll say, oh, you have to put up this poster and this poster and this poster and sell you more
Yeah.
and more posters with same kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So is it illegal? No, but is it
Well, they
misleading and deceptive?
Well, they did
Yeah.
prosecute the Trump campaign for dark patterns and also AOL for like making it hard to notice exactly what you were agreeing to. So it might be like that. Putting something a little misleading in the fine print can be prosecuted to some extent.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sam, you got some more stories. What do you got?
Now I got a bunch of AI ones. So Chinese researchers are developing military AIs to do things like analyze intelligence. And they're using Meta's Llama because it's open source, even though that violates the terms of service of the open source Llama. But of course, once something is open and distributed, anybody can use it for anything. So people might get upset about that. This is why I haven't heard very many people say we should keep the machine learning models proprietary secrets. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to start hearing that call now that the Chinese government is using American models.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and then, so Copilot, Microsoft has apparently screwed up Copilot, which is makes me feel more secure again. I was really troubled when Microsoft made a brilliant move of like partnering with AI in a brilliant way and being very intelligent. I say, that's not the Microsoft I know. The Microsoft I know has two left feet and falls down like Biden going up the airplane steps. And here they go. So they updated Copilot, and people say they ruined the user experience. It doesn't work as well as it used to, and it's awful now. And they also are modified copilots. You can choose different models, not just ChatGPT, but you can use Claude or Gemini. So apparently they're
Oh,
going to make it connected to multiple models. So this is an interesting development and one I did not see coming because Microsoft and OpenAI are joined at the hip. It's but they seem to be incompetently using the product of OpenAI and spreading off to other products, implying their connection is not as close. I mean, 6 months ago, Microsoft was going to hire all of OpenAI's engineers and put it inside Microsoft. Now they seem to be sort of splitting away from them. So
so Sam, I wonder if this is like the browser wars, where Microsoft is allowing other AIs to be incorporated into their product, so to
it seems
speak.
to be, but of course, Microsoft doesn't really have one of their own. All they have is OpenAI, although it's essentially a Microsoft product. Microsoft mainly funded it. So anyway, it's interesting to see.
Yeah,
I know Claude is very interesting. Claude, I cannot fool as much with logical questions as much as the others because it always breaks every problem into little steps. It follows a little bit more like chain of reasoning, but they're all pretty. I'm surprised they bother with Gemini. Gemini scores pretty badly. But anyway, Claude, Gemini, and OpenAI are probably the leaders. And the
okay.
last one in my AI category I've got to think about, there are now AI security certifications. There are a bunch of them. And I'm teaching AI security. I have been for a couple of years. Maybe I should get some of these. So there's it's maybe too early, but there's one called Certified AI Security Fundamentals from training provider Tonex Incorporated, a 2-day course for like $2,000, and then Certified Generative AI in Cybersecurity, and AI Security and Governance Certification, and IBM Generative AI for Cybersecurity Professionals Specialization. So I don't know, maybe I should get some of these. Maybe I should base my course on them. I got to think about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, Sam. I think it's too early.
That's one argument they point out. You could say it's too
Yeah,
early and the field is changing too fast, but on the other hand, it's exploding. The investments are going in now. People are making decisions about what products to use and what direction to take their company. So you could argue uh, you need to know what's happening now. Anyway, I'm teaching it now, but as far as
yeah,
getting a certification, yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'm not quite sure what to do about it. I didn't know they existed, but they do. AI security certs.
no, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah. So you got,
So, since you're on AI,
yeah.
AI is cropped up into high schools with AI images that are of high school students, which are sexual in nature.
Oh, that. Yeah.
And, we expected this. This is what you'd expect in middle school and high school.
When I was a kid, you did it with people did it with like chalk on the wall.
Yeah, or you take a picture of your teacher's head and glue it onto a Playboy image, something
That kind
along
of thing.
those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So same thing, except these are not as obvious.
Well,
They're
yeah, and of course they can be good enough to maybe get people fired and stuff these days.
yeah, 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 most definitely. And that's why I'm bringing this up.
Yeah. And that's why the election workers are worried. The deep fakes are getting good to where people are probably getting fooled a lot more than we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have another one?
I've got several more in the miscellaneous category. So the one that I
Okay.
thought was actually the most important, the cybersecurity job market has stagnated. It's been growing a lot, like 8 or 10% per year, and in the last year, it has not grown at all. Even though 90% of organizations have unfilled positions or underskilled workers on their cybersecurity team, hiring for these jobs has ground to a halt for the first time in 6 years, and they attribute it for the first time to not enough budget to hire people. Before, they attributed it to not enough qualified candidates, but now there's just not enough money. And I think, this is the legacy of Elon Musk. That's my opinion. It's not there because remember, he fired 80% of Twitter and the company survived. So every other tech company said, hey, we could fire maybe 20% of our people or 30% and it would be okay. So they've cut everything and there's a bunch of highly qualified applicants going around trying to get those jobs. So the market for, I think, all tech positions has been greatly affected by that. Anyway,
Yeah,
so that's,
interesting. Huh.
yeah. And Amazon, many Amazon workers are still complaining about their return to work policy. Next year, everybody has to go to work 5 days a week physically, and it is having the expected effect. The best people are leaving. The people that can't leave are staying. And people are saying this is not based on any actual data, which appears to be true. I mean, all the data I've seen said that people are more productive working from home, as you would imagine. And but I think it's just a covert way of performing layoffs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
People are mad at VMware. VMware a while ago announced after Broadcom bought them, they raised their prices, and now they're saying it is multiplying our costs for VMware by 300%. And the smaller people are trying to figure out some way to transition to something else. Several large companies have said, we're sticking with VMware anyway because the pain of transitioning to something else is so great, it's worth paying 3 times what we've been paying, which is interesting. I mean, you could argue from a capitalist financial point of view, that means Broadcom was correct. VMware was selling this stuff too cheap. If the market will, in fact, bear a much higher price, then they are not, in fact, charging what they should be charging. Um, We'll see. It makes me think of the Washington Post. You know, the Washington Post, by switching from the resistance Democrat position to a neutral position, has betrayed a large portion of their users. 10% of their customers have left, but maybe, you know, that's going to be a good business decision if they actually manage to attract some of the people on the right. But I think everyone that's tried that has failed. There is no middle anymore. You have to be on the left or the right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
moving towards the middle by 10% does not mean you get 10% of people on the right. Not at all.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
And I got a couple
Interesting.
more small ones. Microsoft has delayed Windows recall again. Now it's going to be December. And again, for the same reason. There's a huge outcry from the privacy and security community. And Microsoft keeps wanting to roll it out and then finding out everybody really hates this. You know, recall being this product that will take screenshots every few seconds and record everything you do so an AI can trawl through it for some highly unclear benefit, exactly what benefit you get from it doing all that. And Apple's
Yep.
product is not out yet. That's why I'm waiting. I wonder if a lot of people are too. I'm waiting to see what happens with Apple's product that will supposed to do the same thing. You still don't have that on your phone, even if you have a new phone. It's like an early beta or something. This AI assistant to help you run your life that knows everything about you.
Well, I will say that Apple has been advertising it.
Yeah, it's coming. And
Yeah.
I would trust Apple to do it a lot more than I trust Microsoft to do it. So I'd like to see
Yes.
what happens with Apple's rollout before I try using any of these Microsoft products.
Yeah.
And I got, so I wasn't surprised by this, but there's a big report out. Let me see which, from security.com. They went through, they're reporting on research. They went through mobile apps and looked for their API keys that were hard coded in and found a ton of mobile apps with a lot of users that have cloud storage, AWS keys, Azure keys, and so on, in hard coded into the apps. This is one of like the top 10 flaws in software is to hard code passwords or credentials. And when you do it in Android, it's really bad because you basically distribute the source code with the app. So I'm not too surprised that it happened, but it's nice to see a report exposing it. I know GitHub now has a feature you can turn on that will warn you if you appear to be hard coding API keys in your code, if people would just turn it on.
Hmm.
But apparently, a bunch of people are still making that mistake. To be fair, a bunch of people are still making the mistake from 30 years ago of just putting a secret backdoor account in their products. I keep seeing this one go by, and that's ridiculous. I mean, that was in the movie Tron. It's I thought we all knew not to do that. And I got two more little ones. One is kind of fun. The Russians have fined Google an unthinkable amount of money that you can't even express, like times 10 to the 36, because they actually made a judgment that said the award will double every day after the deadline. And I remember this being thousands of years ago. There were kings that said, I'll give you 1 grain of rice today and we'll double the number of grains of rice on every square on the chessboard. And people
Yeah.
didn't learned back then that this will turn into an unthinkable number before long. And the Russian courts apparently haven't learned this. So and the last one I thought was a journalist that record phone calls. The guy that wrote this article said he'd been paying like $80 a year for a special app to record phone calls. And now Apple has built this into iOS, the latest version. So you can just record a phone call. But it does put out one of those warnings. This phone call is being recorded, like Zoom does. So
Okay.
anyway, that's interesting. And they said one thing people should know is that doesn't necessarily make it legal. Um, and they should know the laws about recording their phone calls in their state before using this thing, which would seem like a fair consideration. Although I think that voice would tend to make it legal. Both sides can hear that. Anyway, it's
I think
but you're on mute again, I think. You're still on mute, I think. Technical troubles
how
over.
about now? Yeah,
Yeah, now it's
technical
good.
troubles.
Yeah.
My menu is gone at the oh there now it's popped back
This
up.
happens to my
Okay.
students too. Yeah. So do you know anything about legality of recording phone calls?
Yeah, so I've actually looked into this a couple times. You're right. It varies state by state, and I don't think it's legal because you have to get consent, and notification is not consent, right? Somebody verbally has to say, I agree,
Yeah, that's what I
and just hearing it is not an agreement.
that would make sense because you might
Yeah,
hear that for some reason. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah,
it's
yeah. So, it varies by state. The other thing that's interesting is that when it comes to recording, you also have to get consent if you're face to face in a private setting versus a public setting.
yeah,
There's some little variations, and although there are 50 states, there are 40 of them that are kind of grouped pretty much together. But then the others, there's a lot of variation to it depending on the setting. But at the end, I wonder if it's ever been prosecuted.
that I don't know.
Yeah. So even though the law is there, it's I think somebody be hard pressed to get a conviction.
Yeah,
And if you call up any of these companies, they tell you that the phone call is being recorded for training purposes. It's not training.
it's for legal purposes. Yeah. Uh, I still got
Yeah, it's
yeah.
yeah, it's a covert way of saying that you agree to be recorded.
And I guess
And they tell you,
if you then complain or sue or something, then they have some evidence.
yeah, then they say, well, we were told you it was being recorded for training purposes.
Well,
Now,
I've seen, yeah.
uh,
I've
Sam, I've tried to record a phone call
yeah.
and I tell them, oh, if you're recording me, I'm going to record you. And they say, oh, you can't do that.
Well, I don't think they're right, but you need a lawyer to tell you.
Well, if they're giving consent to record the call and I've given consent to record the call, we both have given consent that the call can be recorded,
Well, maybe
but
they
no,
consent for them to record the call, but not for you.
but it's not specified in the law.
That's where I would need a lawyer. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly the kind of, I remember it's the exact little details that matter. Yeah. Anyway,
True.
all I've got. Have you got any more?
I'm not sure if this is an old story. Maybe this just popped up, but it's kind of interesting. Black Lives Matters is on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yeah, I thought they were been pretty much gone for a long time. I think the founder was corrupt and stole the money or something.
Well, that's beside the point, but donations are down. And
Yeah.
if you remember, a lot of their donations came from Silicon Valley Bank, or I shouldn't say from the bank, but from bank customers.
Yeah.
A lot of the people, Black Lives Matters was on the board, or a couple of them were, which highly encouraged donations.
Yeah, I thought it was a very wise slogan, and I generally support the movement, but in fact, the actual operation of it seemed to be pretty bad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I thought it
All
was
right, do you
brilliant.
have more for it?
No, but I
Oh,
thought that was a brilliant political slogan. How can you argue with that? Black Lives Matter. That really cuts to the heart of the matter, because basically
yeah,
that is the right wing position: is that Black lives don't matter.
yeah, yeah. What's the opposite, right?
Yeah, it's a lot better than most political slogans. Anyway,
Yeah.
yep. Well, I think that's it for this one, and
Okay, that's it for me too.
I'll have another one on Tuesday, glorious election day.
Election day, we'll be calling the countdown, right, to see who's going to win.
No, well,
Not me. We'll let you know on Friday, a
we're
week
having a
from
cyber
today.
competition between three colleges, and one of the organizers said we can't have it on election day. People won't come, and I said, why? They said maybe it'll be unsafe to travel. I said, I don't think there'll be riots in the Bay Area. And they said, well, maybe they'll be glued to their television set watching the returns. And I said, but we're not going to know who won.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're having the competition on election day. We'll see what happens.
See what happens.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, here we go.